So many of you have been asking, Camp Chef Woodwind Pro or Lone Star Grillz pellet grill? Which one is the better smoker? Which one is the best for the money? Which one does a better job? Well, the answer lies in these briskets because we cooked them absolutely identically in both of these smokers, and we're about to find out, does 3 times the cost make 3 times the brisket? Now let's find out. Now I know that you're here for this brisket comparison video, but it's important to know exactly what we're doing to these briskets and to know that we're doing them exactly the same. So come on in here, I'm gonna show you what we did to prepare these briskets. It's important to know that not all parts of the brisket are usable in this case. So we're gonna start by trimming off the parts like the decal fat, the oxidized meat, and things like that that are not good for a brisket cook. We then shape it up and trim it up and remove some of the thinner parts and to make it a little bit more aerodynamic. We continue to trim the fat, anything that's hanging off, and even thin down the fat cap on the back if it needs trimmed. Now we've got a fairly decent looking trimmed brisket. As you can see, I like to take my knife and scrape perpendicular to the strands of meat with my knife blade, and this just roughs up the surface. I'm not cutting into it, just scraping. From here, it is a light mustard binder. You can use whatever kind of binder that you'd like. It's important to know that we're also seasoning both of these briskets exactly the same with my homemade brisket rub. I'll put a recipe down in the description. What we do to one side, we're gonna do to the other with both binder and rub. And most importantly, don't forget the sides. Whenever we're seasoning a piece of meat, especially something as thick as a brisket, we wanna make sure that we season all sides. Now it's on to the smoker. Fat cap up and the thickest part closest to the firebox, and we also want it to be offset away from the heat source. I've also placed a foil pan underneath to catch any drippings, to divert any heat, and to break down some of the trimmed fat into tallow. We've placed both briskets exactly the same on each grill, away from the heat source and the thickest part facing the heat source. Now for this Lone Star Grillz pellet grill and Woodwind Pro comparison, this is all about simplicity and keeping everything exactly the same. We've got both smokers running at 250 degrees. We have both briskets sitting up on the upper shelf, away from the heat sources. That way we're not exposing anything to hot spots. We've seasoned, we've prepped, we've trimmed, and we've done everything nearly the same. It is time to just let them set up. We want this rub to become intact and start to get a little barky. We will spritz it in a bit, but as you know with briskets, it's about letting it get set up first, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. 3.5 hours in, the bark is setting up and things are looking a little dry. It's time to hit it with a spritz. I'll put a recipe down in the description for exactly what I use to spritz these briskets. I continue to let the bark build and I spritz when the surface looks dry. But when the temperature reaches about 165 degrees internally, it's time for the foil boat. 2 sheets of heavy-duty wide foil, scoop of Wagyu tallow, throw that brisket right in the middle and start making that foil canoe right around that brisket. Then it's back into the smoker exactly how you found it. Continue to smoke till you get about 201, 202 in the brisket, then transfer the whole thing to a foil pan. Let it cool down just a little bit. We're gonna put this into my oven at 160 degrees to rest. Well, we made it through the night. That means the brisket is inside resting, and it's a perfect time to talk about both of these grills, the Lone Star Grillz pellet grill and the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. Now I can tell you both of them ran flawlessly throughout the night, but there are a few differences in what I saw in how they ran. The first thing that I noticed is that the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro ran a little hot. For the overnight cook, I used my ThermalWorks signals. What I wanted to do was remove any bias from the controllers and use something that they shared in common. I used a pit probe and a meat probe in each smoker, and by looking at this, we could measure exactly how the temperatures compared to one another using the same technology. The Lone Star Grillz pellet grill ran pretty true to 250 degrees, which is what our set point was, but the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro ran pretty hot. It ran about 20 degrees hot. With this ThermalWorks signals, I'm able to chart out the data throughout the cook. And while the briskets cooked just fine and honestly mirrored each other, the one thing that I did notice is that recovery time on the Lone Star Grillz was about half the time that what I saw on the Woodwind Pro. Now, what does that mean? When I opened the lid, because I was spritzing, because I was filming, because I was checking, because I was putting it in the foil boat and getting it back into the smoker, whatever it was, anytime there was a disturbance, me opening the lid, it took about 3 minutes for the Lone Star Grillz to recover back to set point, whereas the Woodwind Pro took about 6 minutes to recover. I can tell you another thing that I noticed with the temperature, and I don't know if it is the reason why, but using the smoke box, we are integrating an additional fuel source, something that the controller doesn't have any control of per se. That may have resulted in that increased temperature, but nonetheless, once I saw that it was running hot and it was gonna run hot and steady, I backed the temperature off a little bit so that it got closer to that 250 degrees. This is a comparison. We wanna see how the food turns out. I'm not gonna burn something over here just because of the way it's running. I backed it off so that these could get as close to comparable as possible. Another thing that I did notice was pellet consumption. Now granted, I could have done a better job at measuring this, but I can tell you from what I had to replace, the Lone Star Grillz pellet grill burned a little bit more pellets than the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. Now there's a couple theories behind that. First off, that's a much larger pit. There's a lot more volume, meaning a lot more heat is needed to heat up the smoker, but it does a better job at retaining the heat. The Woodwind Pro also has that smoke box where I was burning fist-sized chunks of oak that was adding to some of the heat. Now with that, I will say there's one thing that the Lone Star Grillz does really, really well that the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro can't necessarily say it does. The Lone Star Grillz ran like a locomotive all night. The smoke was the same, it was consistent, and it was pretty thick, and it was that perfect transparent blue all night and all morning. The Woodwind Pro had fluctuations of that. A lot of it was a result of the smoke box. I found myself about every hour needing to add another chunk of hardwood oak to the smoke box. So what did that mean? On an overnight cook, I could leave this thing for hours and know that it would be fine and I would get consistent smoke. This one here on this overnight cook, I was literally up every hour, adding more wood, checking things, spritzing, whatever it was, but I needed to be present in order to achieve that smoke. I will say though, when the smoke box was loaded up and it was working as intended, it was smokier than the Lone Star Grillz. But truth be told, the consistency and ease of use is gonna have to go to the Lone Star Grillz. In our final taste test, we're gonna find out exactly how much that smoke affected the overall product. With these, I used the exact same pellets. I used cooking pellets. I used their premium blend, which has hickory, maple, apple, and cherry. I really like them. It's a very consistent blend, very high quality pellets, and I get a good amount of smoke out of them. I use the exact same pellets in both. Now, if you're familiar with the Lone Star Grillz, because of the style of the auger being an open center auger, looks like a spring that you pulled apart like this. Because of that open center, you can use the Lone Star Grillz wood chips mixed in with the pellets, and it adds to the smoke flavor. So what I did is in a 5-gallon bucket, I would mix up layers of pellets and I would mix up layers of wood chips and get it pretty consistent throughout in that bucket and then dump it into the hopper. I used about a 50-50% blend. With the Woodwind Pro, we ran those fist-size oak chunks all night. And because we were using the foil boat method, I kept adding smoke. I kept adding those wood chunks through the entire cook because that bark, that fat cap, remained exposed the entire time. Yesterday, I posted a reel and shorts on all my social media asking you what your questions were for this comparison. We've already addressed a few of them in the conversation so far. One of the things that people are asking is ease of use. And I'm gonna be honest with you, they're about the same. Startup is about the same. There are really no extra steps that either one of these have. Now granted, the smoke box requires a little bit more maintenance. You have to be there, you have to physically put the hardwood in. But if you're gonna be present during the cook, it's not difficult. You pull it out, you put a chunk in, you shut it, and it's good to go. Ash clean out on these are both very good. In fact, they're probably the two best pellet grill ash cleanouts that are available today in terms of being able to empty the ash without taking the entire grill apart. But both of them do the ash cleanout very well. Same with grease management. Both of them do very well with grease management. When it comes to cleaning these grills, they're relatively the same. The difference you're gonna find is that the Lone Star Grillz components that you have to remove are much larger and much heavier, and that's just due to the size and the materials. Is that more difficult? Maybe for some people, but in general, it's gonna be about the same process. One thing that I'm gonna tell you that I've noticed in many, many cases, but my wife actually pointed out yesterday, are the wheels. She explicitly said the Camp Chef needs better wheels, and that's something that I've wanted to address I'm gonna take some measurements, I'm gonna go to Harbor Freight, and I'm gonna put some more rugged, more off-road wheels that'll help me maneuver my driveway and garage a little better than what I'm currently getting with these wheels. If you're not doing a lot of moving or it's gonna stay stationary on your patio, really doesn't matter to you, but it sort of matters to me. Now, we all know that the million-dollar question is the actual results themselves, and we're gonna get to them very soon. But the one thing that I do want to talk about is price. Some of you are going to say that it is not a fair comparison. And truthfully, it is and it isn't. They both are pellet grills. They both have the same purpose, and that is being able to grill or smoke the food. The materials are significantly different. The quality is significantly different, and so is the price. This Lone Star Grilz, the way it sits with the off-road package, with the stainless steel foldable front shelf, with delivery, if you have to have it delivered freight like I did, you're pushing upwards of $5,000. With the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro, with the Sidekick, you're looking at about $1,700. Now granted, the Sidekick isn't necessary, but I'm telling you, if you buy anything Camp Chef pellet grill and you're not getting the Sidekick, you're making a mistake. So we're gonna say that this is the desired configuration. With that being said, as it sits, as it's configured in their desirable formats, like you see here, I'm gonna say that the Camp Chef gets the versatility badge. This is the most versatile pellet grill on the market. With that Sidekick, you can use the griddle, a pizza oven, a deluxe barbecue grill box. You can use the burner as a standalone burner itself, and then you've got that pellet grill and smoker. It's the most versatile. In fact, when it comes to pellet grills, these are probably the two best when it comes to smoke that I have used so far, and what I've seen with some of my friends as well. I've been around the Rectex, the Yoders, the Z-Grills, the Pit Boss, the Webers, the Camp Chef, the Lone Star Grills, and I'm gonna tell you, these two are at the top of the class. If you don't think this is a fair comparison, I'm sorry, but so many people care about the quality of the food that comes off that sometimes the price doesn't necessarily matter, and that's what I'm here to address today. We cooked these briskets exactly the same. The size of them is slightly different. They're both prime, bought from the same store, seasoned with the same things. We used the same binders. We trimmed them in the same style. We cooked them on the upper rack at the same temperatures. We put a foil pan underneath to catch the drippings and to put some of the fat to produce some tallow. We kept them away from the heat source. We're resting them the same way. Inherently, these are the same cooks, and what we're concerned about is the quality of the food, and does nearly triple the price impact the overall results that we would get with the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro? We're about to find out. Let me grab those briskets, let me grab my gloves and a knife, and we're gonna find out which one of these cooked the best brisket. Now, before we go through the results, I wanna talk a little bit about this entire process. Regardless of what the results are going to be, there are going to be people who don't believe me and think that I have some inherent brand loyalty or that one company is paying me more than the other. The reality is I have received both grills from each company at no cost, but that's because I'm making content that is beneficial for them. With that being said, I do not receive paychecks from either one of them. I also don't have any special agreements or any terms of use or anything like that that would force me to say one thing about one company other than what my actual opinion is. I think it's very important because I've been in YouTube for 4.5 years. I run 2 monetized YouTube channels. One of the important things to know is there are plenty of people, I could name channels and I could name products, that when you see these particular things, people are getting paid. That is not happening here. That is not happening here today. And the results, regardless of what they are, take them for science for what it is. These are the results that we had from these briskets, and I think it's very important for you to know that regardless of what they are, there is no extreme loyalty to one product or the other. I am simply making 2 briskets exactly the same way on 2 different smokers because you, the audience, wants to know the truth. And in terms of any loyalty, my loyalty is to you. Now let's get to those results. These briskets are done, and as you can see, they look nearly identical in appearance, and I can tell you just from touching it as well, they are both super tender. Now the question is, which one did a better job? The Camp Chef Woodwind Pro or the Lone Star Grilz pellet grill? Let's pull these out of the foil boat. We're gonna find out exactly how good they are. With this comparison, video between both of these grills. None of that matters until we actually dive on in and see what the final product is. Now at first glance, I can tell you they feel nearly identical. This one here has a little bit crunchier bark, but they look and feel about the same, but this one has a little bit more crunch. Now, to compare it, we're gonna cut directly into the center and we're gonna take a slice of that flat or that lean closest to the center. Now I know which is which. I have some taste testers off to my left here that will have the opportunity to tell me which one they believe is best and give me some feedback on that. I'm gonna cut them in half here. We smoked both of these fat cap up and I'm looking at the smoke penetration. And I see, though they're slightly different, they are near identical in terms of how deep the smoke got. This one here, this is the bottom. It doesn't seem to have penetrated quite as much as this one. And the fat cap obviously prevented some of that smoke penetration on the top. But if we look at the sides, they're pretty similar. I would say this one gets a little bit of an advantage when it comes to the smoke ring. Now to the tenderness, they are both very tender, they are both very juicy. I'm personally going to take a slice of each and I'm gonna give it a try. Like I said, I know which one is which. Super juicy, very tender. That bark is delicious. Good texture with that, good texture with the flat itself. Let's try the other one. To me, this one over here has a little bit less of a smokier taste. It is more profound in this one here than it is over here. I'm gonna give a slice to my taste testers. We'll let them try. Which one tastes smokier? Two? Two was smokier and more tender? Did you agree it's more tender? It's funny, I agreed with that for both of them. Do you notice anything with the bark? The bark about the same? Was different? Well, folks, the verdict is in. The votes are unanimous when it comes to the results. The smokier brisket is this one, and it came off the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. The more tender brisket came off the Woodwind Pro, and the juicier brisket came off the Woodwind Pro. Now, mind you, these were nearly identical. This one weighed a little bit more. This one initially was cooked at a slightly higher temperature because that Camp Chef was running hotter. But they were both cooked exactly the same way, using the same methods, same binder, same seasoning, same everything. I will say that I like the fat rendering a little better in the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. I like the bark a little bit better on the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. And I think the smoke flavor is slightly more pronounced from the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. Now listen, does that mean that this is a terrible brisket? You are out of your mind if you think I'm gonna say that, because both of these briskets are frickin' delicious, but we have to pick a winner. And in this test, using the foil boat method, cooking at 250 degrees overnight, fat cap up, foil boat, resting for about 6 hours in the oven at 160 degrees, the winner is the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. It makes a slightly better final result. Does that mean it's gonna be the same on every single smoke, on every single protein, every time you use it? No. In this test, under these circumstances, it was a unanimous vote. Nobody except me knew which one was which, and I intentionally gave them in the reverse order so that they couldn't mimic what I was saying. We've all voted that the categories that mean the most to us, smoke, tenderness, juiciness, and bark, all go to the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro. This here is a phenomenal brisket, but the Camp Chef Woodwind Pro took the cake. If you want to see more video comparisons between pellet grills, especially these two, be sure to comment down below. Tell me what you want to see. Tell me what questions you want answered if I didn't answer everything in this one. And be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and check out this video right here.